Hey Chris, how you doing? Hey Chris, how you doing? Thanks for having me. I'm having a little trouble hearing you right now. If you have a technical issue on your end, you can fix. Can you hear me, Chris? Okay.
Stephen, can you hear me better now?
There you go, Chris. I can hear you now.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
Stephen,
perfect.
I was giving them a little introduction about you. I was talking about how I think you're one of the most skilled politicians that I know. Because and I was telling them, you don't set the day, but if I win this election, I want to. I hope you'll consider being my district director, one of my district directors, because you understand everything that's going on in this community, from Murray County in the west to the south of Lincoln and Franklin, all the way east to Bradley and Ray County, because you understand the issues on the ground. What do you think? Can you give me a little bit about your background, your history, and tell me a little bit more about you?
Sure, Chris. Well, I'm a native Tennessean. I was born and raised down in Coffee County. I moved to Rutherford County way back in 1988. Much different community back then than it is today. And I've lived here for 33 years now. Started my career here in Rutherford County in the infrastructure industry. I'm in building materials. My father actually started a business here back in the 80s. And I learned that trade as a young man, went to school at Middle Tennessee State, and then used those skills to launch myself into a global career where have been traveling the world, traveling the country, really for the last 25 years. And my main emphasis is infrastructure, and that's really what I'm about, Chris. I know there are so many other important issues out there, but I'm an infrastructure guy. So I have two children, and my wife Shelly. Shelly's here. Shelly's been running around trying to get the background. She hates the windows in the back, if you can see those. So, but anyway, we're living here in Western Rutherford County, and I love the city of Murfreesboro in Rutherford County, and proud to be a Tennessean. Wish I had a better congressman. Chris, where is Scott Desjardins?
It's the question I get, across this entire community, and the answer is we don't know. I mean, I think that one of the things that one of the things that you saw and up close is this scandal, that these multitude of scandals that happened in, I guess, several years ago, but really came out in 2010 and 2012. I think it rendered him ineffective. It made him,
Yes.
I worked in the House floor in Congress, and I always tell the story about how Scott never had the ability to have his own thoughts, his own actions. He'd only operate off a note card. He would get the orders from on high, but he would never really fight or advocate or go against his party on anything. It seems like the
Right.
only time he goes against his party is when he can vote against Tennesseans. I think it was shocking to me that a month ago now, I guess 6 weeks ago, he voted against free virus testing, the small business stimulus, a multitude of things that would help local Tennesseans. And it's shocking to me that Republicans need that too.
Oh,
Republicans, that it's
right.
not just Democrats who are looking for that. Stephen,
Yeah.
I had a question for you. Can you explain a little bit about Mitch McConnell's plan here that he's talking about? He's talking about offering immunity to states for misaction, misdeeds in the coronavirus.
Yes, well, not only the states, Chris, but he's wanting a liability shield for all businesses. Now, that means that basically anyone who contracted this virus at work, or a consumer, a customer, if you contracted the virus somewhere because of negligence, not following the CDC guidelines, whatever type of case, Mitch McConnell right now has drawn a red line and is saying that he will pass no further stimulus bill unless he gets a legal shield over all of the local governments, state governments and the businesses. And I think that's just wrong, Chris. I think that is disenfranchising American citizens. Now, folks, you're hearing a lot of things about people saying, you're violating my rights by asking me to wear a mask. Well, let me tell you something, folks. Going to court and having your day in court is just as American as the United States Constitution. It is an institution of this country and why this country is so great and why we have achieved so much. One of the main drivers of the big box businesses right now, the reason why they won't open, Chris, is because they're responsible. And they are telling this administration that until we have widespread testing and tracing of those that test positive, we're not opening our businesses back up because of the liability. We value there are a lot of good actors out there. And I think Democrats have to be very careful not to go down the road of being anti-business here. The thousands of Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies, they have armies of risk managers, of safety professionals. I've worked for them, some of these bigger companies, I've worked with them, and I think that it's a misnomer to say that these companies or all companies, to group them and stereotype them all together, don't value their employees. And I think that actually responsible businesses and the vast majority of businesses understand that their employees are critical and their most valuable asset. I can't imagine very few business owners that would ever want their employee to get sick, their customers to get sick, but still there are bad actors out there, and that's where the courts come in to play. And with a liability shield in place, if one of your family members goes to work and the employer is negligent in some way and your family member catches this and dies, you will have absolutely no recourse in the courts. And I think that is wrong. And I can't believe, well, actually I can, because he shut down the U.S. Senate for much less than this. But he has drawn the red line in the sand, and I hope that Leader Pelosi and the Democrats in the House will not budge on this issue, because it is as fundamentally a basic right of all Americans to have their day in court. Doesn't mean they're going to win. Doesn't mean the judge isn't going to throw it out. But when you stop allowing that to happen, there's only really two products in the world right now that are free of liability, and those are vaccines. And that there's a very good reason for that, because if a vaccine company is sued and loses, we lose a vaccine company, and obviously that's a critical thing, no matter whether we're in a pandemic or not. But the other thing, Chris, is guns. There is product liability protection for firearms. You can't sue a firearm manufacturer. And so basically, that's really the only two things that I can come up with that have that type of shield. And I hope that Leader Pelosi stands firm on this. And I really think that it will be a huge mistake. Once again, the vast majority of business owners are responsible. No one wants this to happen to them if they are following the guidelines that have been put out there. And especially if they're an essential business. I believe being an essential business gives you an elevated status, an elevated protection from some sort of liability. The courts will ultimately determine that. And let's talk about that one more thing on that, Chris. If this were to pass, it'll end up in the United States Supreme Court. I have absolutely zero doubt about that. And so you'll have obviously a very long delay. These things can stretch out 3 to 5 years if we started tomorrow. So obviously that's a very long time from now. But I think that's something that we really need to raise the flag over right now. And we have to make sure that we're not stereotyping all of the businesses. The last thing we want the Democrats to do is to be classified as anti-business or against business. I think that's wrong. Obviously, one of our favorite governors, Chris, I know that you were a fan. A lot of people were a fan, but Ned Ray McWhorter once said that the best social program is a good job. I still believe that, and I still believe in the capitalist free market system, Chris.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think that you really highlighted the private market aspect of that. I'm thinking too, there seems to be some missteps by our own state government that are going on with the coronavirus. Two that come to mind. There's now 2,000 prisoners in this state, and correctional officers as well, doctors and nurses in the state prison system who tested positive. Trousdale County is the #1 per capita outbreak in this country. 1,200 prisoners there, and of course down in our district in Bledsoe County, 600. Under Mitch McConnell's plan, those family members of correctional officers, of inmates, of doctors and nurses have no recourse against this state government. And I don't know if you saw this, but I put a public records request into the state of Tennessee, and we're working on that right now. But they punted on a vast majority of dockets till May 31st. Mitch McConnell might be done with this before then. And so it's really remarkable to me. And the second issue, I think, in Rutherford County, we're starting to see, we don't know a lot, but there's definitely some outbreak at nursing homes. We do not know what's happened there. It's worthy of investigation, obviously, but there should be recourses for missteps by the state of Tennessee as well. And I think that concerns me that we can't just simply give them a free pass. If they
Right.
have misconduct, if our elderly die, if our correctional officers are sick, families should be able to get recourse. And it strikes me as that if studying that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mitch McConnell's rhetoric right now is basically trying to tell people that you should be more afraid of trial lawyers in this country than you should be of the coronavirus, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But also, I appreciate what you're doing with the prison system. You know, we do have protections for the prisoners. Now, I know that a lot of folks out there saying, well, they did something wrong and they deserve to be in prison. All of that may be true, but are you a moral person? Are you a Christian person? Chris, I would love to know. I would almost be willing to bet that half of those prisoners are in the state prison for nonviolent offenses, probably drug offenses. And as we know, they broke the law. They're paying their debt back to society, but they're still human beings. And cruel and unusual punishment is right there in the law. And there's really no way to get around it. I don't see that, but I appreciate the fact that you're taking up for that. But let's talk about the state employees as well. I mean, listen, these prisons struggle to get guards and employees in the first place. Number one, because the pay is so low. Number two, it's an extremely dangerous situation. And you got to be kind of a special person to be a guard at a prison and work for the state of Tennessee. And so, you know, to me, these folks are the first in line behind the first responders. These folks are right up there with the first responders. Matt Colvert, who I know you're having on soon, is the county commissioner there in Bledsoe County. He's calling for hazardous pay for these state employees. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it has to be very difficult to get up in the morning, get dressed, and go into a job where you know that there are 500 ticking time bombs all around you, just like our doctors and our nurses, with the exception of the PPE and of the testing and all of the precautions that our medical professionals take. And I believe that we, of the state of Tennessee, have a responsibility not only to our employers, but also even to those that are paying their debt to society. So I really appreciate what you're doing on this, Chris, because it's important that we hold everyone's feet to the fire. And these guys Bill Lee wanted to be the governor. Donald Trump wanted to be the president. Well, you've got it now, and now it's time to lead. And you know, I think it's still very mixed at the state level, and obviously I think it's a disaster on the federal level, Chris.
Well, and Stephen, I want to talk to you. I have a pathway to victory that I want to talk about right now. That I think, you know, I got into this race in particular because of the coronavirus. It's what catapulted me over top to get in this. The reality of it is, I'm gonna have to win over a lot of Trump voters, and they probably will. You know, and I'm not just saying past Trump voters, but current Trump voters. What's remarkable to me is it seems like the only time Scott Desjardins goes against the president of the United States is when it particularly can help our community. And I think that, you know, I want to be a champion of those who will first and foremost the victims of the coronavirus. To me, the correctional officers, I want to fight for them. The inmate families, the elderly in our nursing homes, the first responders, the teachers, et cetera. But let's talk about hazard pay for a second.
Sure.
Can you explain to a Republican right now, a Trump voter, why hazard pay? What go for it and make the argument.
Because we are operating in an elevated environment, in an elevated liability environment right now. The liability for everyone is elevated. It's like asking a regular firefighter to go into a blazing forest fire for the same pay. So when these folks are going in, they are literally risking their lives. Now, people say, well, you can have all of these arguments about the virus and the death rate and the infection rate and all of that, but there is no doubt that there's an elevated risk to human life right now, not only the employee, but the employee's immediate family and all of those folks that surround that. So that's why they deserve hazard pay, Chris, is because they are literally running into a burning building right now. And that's just in a nutshell why they deserve hazard pay.
And one thing too, I think that is striking about it is that these folks are there's actually been some interesting arguments on the right. One is that people at home right now, some people at home are getting paid a little bit more than they actually getting paid in the workplace, and the fact that these people are having to go to work and they don't have the opportunity to collect unemployment. They have to go to work. It seems to me that there's state funds that can be released to help these folks. And I think that we can restructure that. I want to talk to you a little bit about the unemployment and also too about the first stimulus. Do you think the American people deserve a second stimulus check going down the road?
Well, Chris, I would have loved to have seen a direct payment to the American people. So what we saw happen, and I'm very familiar with the SBA process. My wife, Shelley, was heavily involved with her business and her employer as far as the application. So I got to hear all of the ins and outs of what was going on in the SBA. And so essentially, just like in the world, there are two classes of businesses, right? There are the small and medium businesses that don't belong to an association, that can't afford a lobbyist. And then there are the large corporations that can join an association and do have lobbyists. And so the folks that have the lobbyists, they knew what was coming with the SBA. Doesn't make it wrong, doesn't make it illegal, but they were extremely prepared. And when the switch flipped on to apply for those loans, they pressed send. Meanwhile, John Citizen down here at Joe's Rib Shack, he's struggling with his bank. They're trying to figure it out. There's no training for the bankers. You have all of these big banks giving preferential treatment to the clients that they already do business with. You can totally understand why. But essentially, that money was sucked up. This is the reason why it should be in direct payments to the citizens, because it eliminates all of that. And if we had dropped this money in everyone's bank account instead of to these big businesses, then the people pick the winners. The free market picks the winners. We decide which businesses are going to get our business. We decide who's going to get our money, right? And so I think that's important.
Well, it's interesting. I remember when Sarah Palin ran for vice president 12 years ago, she one of her big highlighted things was crony capitalism. And you know what? I do think it's crony capitalism that Harvard got $8 million when they have a $2 billion endowment. I think if I was a liberal or conservative, I would say that's wrong. And what you've done is if you give the dollar bills directly to the American people and put it in everyone's pocket, like you said, you created the equal playing field. You're not picking favorites. I've in my career been both W-2 and 1099. I've been both small business and within the government. What's remarkable about this is our unemployment system, our PPE system. It is a 1995 reality. It does not fit the common times. And it really hurts. I think about a lot about the entrepreneurs that I've talked about, the small business folks who don't go through traditional banking and they don't have the traditional format. They got stuck out in the mud for this,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those are the last guys at the bottom of the totem pole. I have a small business, Chris. I had just started a small business basically a year ago, and everything was going great. But, it's a one-man show, kind of like you said, the gig economy. As a matter of fact, I was looking at hiring my first employee. If I brought on this next contract, then the virus hits, there you go. I'm sure that happens to a lot of people out there. But yes, the smallest businesses are left out of this. And, we know that 50% of all small businesses are going to fail anyway. And so the most interesting thing about this SBA loan was that there were no P&L required, no documents required, P&L, debts, balance sheets. None of that was required. And so you have companies that were on the verge of going bankrupt that have suddenly been bailed out by the government. But meanwhile, and they're still not going to make it long term. But meanwhile, once again, you've got the guys down here at the alley on Main, or I don't mean to use those, but anyone, any small business, for example, that is struggling to get that SBA and get a piece of that pie. So I really wish it had been direct payments to the citizens, because I think the citizens, it's just always better when the citizens pick the winners.
Yes, I think that I absolutely agree. And I think one of the things is there's also a lack of audit procedures, and that's something that will come down the road, obviously. But one of the things people have talked about is means testing. Well, it should have been people above this level should have gotten checking. That's what the government did. But we still have folks who haven't gotten their unemployment, who haven't gotten their first $1,200 check. The thing about means testing, I don't think a lot of people understand, is it slows the process down significantly. The best means testing is to tax it next year. Get everyone their payments and get it out quickly. Stephen, I want to ask you one more question, and then we're going to open up the questions. You ran against Scott Desjardins in 2016. What's your biggest advice for me in this race?
Chris, I think my biggest advice for you is to reach across the aisle, to not don't insult the folks that are Republicans. Don't insult the folks that vote for Donald Trump. You're running a race against Scott Desjardins, and that is your opponent. And so I think that the most important thing is to try to reach across the aisle and to try to get. I truly believe, Chris, that most people, most Tennesseans in the 4th Congressional District, we all know that the Sequatchie Valley needs a 4-lane from Marion County all the way to Pikeville. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Everyone knows that we need to get that done. So try to find the issues of common ground when you're out campaigning, when we're meeting folks, because that's the thing. We have gotten absolutely nothing for the last 10 years except a bunch of rhetoric. And Chris, I know you're competent and you're transparent. And we don't, it's hard to tell if Scott Desjardins is competent or not. You would like to think that a guy that goes to medical school would be leading the charge against a virus, against a pandemic that's impacting our own home, but he's silent. We need a congressman that's going to be out front and that's going to listen to both sides, and at the end of the day, make the decision that is best for all of Tennessee.
Stephen, let's go ahead and open up the questions. So, Stephen, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, well, thanks, Andy, for that question. Do I think that folks that are pro-social distancing or mask in public are scared or afraid? No, I don't, Andy. I think they passed biology class in high school, and they understand science, and they want to listen to the professionals that have spent their entire life studying medicine. Listen, Facebook, social media is the only place in the world where a quantum physicist with 40 years of experience can get questioned by a guy who didn't pass, who dropped out of high school, okay? So the part of this debasing of our institutions and this lack of trust in experts, those are actually the goals of foreign countries like China and Russia. They want us to question our experts. Don't get me wrong, everyone should ask questions. But listen, guys, when it comes to science, when it comes to basic science, viruses have been around forever. And so, no, I don't believe that people that are pro-social distancing are afraid. I don't believe that they are scared. I actually believe that they will be the survivors of the Darwinism that we're watching play out in front of us today.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to take the next question. That's okay. This is from John Williamson. It's actually a pretty provocative question. So John asks, Facebook asking to say something, so I'll ask, what's your stance on securing economic prosperity for citizens before the rights of foreign citizens to immigrate to this country? Said a different way, isn't it best for America to take care of its own people first, especially during this time of massive well, I mean, it's a fair question, John. I think the thing I would say is that the President of the United States has pretty much stopped immigration into this country into context of the coronavirus, COVID-19. That's probably the right move. We need to stop. We need to secure our borders. That's always something I've supported. That being said, I mean, immigrants are the number one job creator in the state of Tennessee. So over the long haul, immigrants raise our children's wages. So if you're a native Tennessean, thank God for immigrants. Thank God they exist because they're raising everyone's wages. But you hit on a point I think it's really important. I am unafraid to say that we should take care of our own citizens first. We should be unafraid to say that. I'm going to fight for Tennesseans, and I'm going to fight for Tennesseans first and foremost before the Democratic Party, before the Republican Party, before any president. My loyalty when I take the oath of office on the 3rd of January is not going to be to any president or party. It's going to be to you and your family. And so I hope that answers your question in some way. Stephen, do you want to take a crack at that at all?
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, I understand that yes, citizens should come first. But we have, and this question has been going on for some time, and the pandemic has really brought it to the forefront. But if it weren't for immigrant and migrant workers, we would all starve to death right now in this country. And so we better be thankful that there are folks that are willing to do the jobs that we're not willing to do. And furthermore, we had better, obviously, we need to take care of the citizens first. But this doesn't matter. This pandemic, this virus doesn't know whether you're a citizen or not. So if people are in this country, doesn't matter if they're citizens or not, they have to be treated, because otherwise we have to find out. We have to make sure that this virus is not spreading throughout the Latino community. This is of critical importance, but absolutely. But we need to remember that immigrants have the hardest life. Imagine leaving your family and going to Argentina and sending money back home and living in a camper. I mean, this is what these folks are doing, and we need to remember that. And be thankful that we have folks that are willing. And you know, this is all a legal process. Of course, we have folks that come here illegally, but without the legal migration of immigrants in here, we would practically starve to death in this country.
You're absolutely right, Stephen. I think that, you know, you and I both live in Rutherford County. Well, let's think about the immigrant started businesses that corporations like Nissan. I mean, we thank God, thank God for immigrants. That truly, they are our GDP is probably up here versus down here because of it. Stephen, you know, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final words you want to say?
Well, Chris, I just want to say good luck. I really support you 100% in this race. You were a very worthy primary opponent in 2018. Garnered a lot of respect for you. When you debate someone's, I think we debated 5 or 6 times, you gain a lot of respect for the other person. You and I both know this is not easy, the undertaking that you have. And so I just want you to know that we're behind you 100%. We're going to help you with all of the folks that we know to make sure that they get to know you and that you're competent and that you're transparent and that you're going to show up. I believe all of those things. And Chris, you're the tip of the spear right now. I believe you're running the hottest congressional race right anywhere in Tennessee right now, and probably anywhere in the South. And so stay on message, stay on the attack, keep saying the truth, Chris. Just keep telling people the truth. Sooner or later, they're going to listen.
Well, Stephen, thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And I appreciate your friendship. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Chris. Have a good
I just want to close out. Thank you for joining again tonight. Tomorrow we will have Matthew Colbard, who is a county commissioner down in Bledsoe County. And on Thursday, we will have State House candidate for Bariah Phillips for District 37 here in Rutherford County. I just want to end with something Stephen highlighted. You have never met Congressman Desjardins. He's been in office a decade. You don't know him, and he doesn't know you. You have met me, and you do know me. And if you haven't met me yet, you know that you will meet me. those people who do not know you will not fight for you. Congressman Desjardins has never stood up for you and your family. Before the virus came, he didn't do anything to stop it. And now that it's here, he's not doing anything to help us. But you know this about me, that I will fight like hell every day to make life better for you and your family. I need you right now. I need your support today, not 6 months or a day. I need you right now. If you feel the energy I do, if you feel the urgency I do, if you feel the love of home and country that I do, I'm asking you to join me. Go to ChristopherHale.com, sign up, give $5 a month, help sustain this operation across 16 counties, across one of the biggest congressional districts in this country. I want you to know this. We're going to win. We're going to beat Scott Desjardins. We're going to have a historic win. We're going to bring a new generation of leadership to this community. We're going to restore decency and integrity. And we're going to have a congressman that shows up and fights for us again. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow.